What is the most disturbing book you ever read? Generals Die in Bed. It's about a man's experience in the trenches in WW1. See, when you're in school learning about WW1, they tell you it was awful, but gloss over a lot of details and give you numbers and statistics. What they don't tell you about is how they had to try and cook the lice out of their clothes, or how sugar was a commodity, or how the soldiers who had been at the front for a while placed bets on which newbie would be killed first. I highly recommend this book to anyone with any interest in WW1. The Long Walk. You are one of 100 boys in a race. You must walk at or over 4 miles per hour, or you are killed by gunshot after 2 warnings. The race ends when 1 boy is left. You start walking. You're terrified, but you lie to yourself saying you have a chance of ending the race in one piece. You get tired and hungry, and your feet are in pain. You keep walking. Eventually you get very tired and hungry, and your feet are in the worst pain they have ever been. You keep walking, because you are strong. Then, you end up in a state of absolute misery. You are in excruciating pain and your body's signals tell your brain with utmost urgency that, if you keep walking, you will die. You keep walking, because you know, if you stop walking, you will die. Then you get your foot ran over by a half track and you die. Edit. Top comment: holy shit. Perhaps more disturbing were the circumstances surrounding the book. In primary school I'd finished books by my favorite authors, R.L. Stein and Martin K.A. Applegate, in the school library, and was wandering around the shelves alone, looking bored. The school librarian was an older man who was also our science teacher. He asked if I wanted to read a new book. He popped into his office and rummaged for a while, then returned with a copy of Z Forza Cherry app. He told me not to tell anybody else I had it, and to return it to his office directly, not the library. I was 9 years old when I read it. The book is set in a post-apocalyptic wasteland and revolves around an older man attempting to rape the main protagonist, a young girl, to repopulate the earth. Anatomy of a Lynching by James McGovern. I was a history education student, and one of my classes required this book be read. I couldn't finish it. I emailed my professor and asked him for advice, as the graphic content of the book literally caused me to feel ill. His advice back is still among the best pieces of advice I've ever been given. He told me to keep in mind that, as MLK said, we are not where we should be. We are not where we are going to be, but thank God we aren't where we were. Apostrophe. I've held that piece of advice close to me ever since. I won't describe this book as disturbing, but there was something very haunting about it. After Dark by Haruki Murakami. It's a very short story about, well, being awake at night in Tokyo. I'm not sure. At the end of the book I got no resolution for the plot. Come to think of it, maybe there wasn't even a plot to begin with. All I know is that I felt there was a lot of weird and terrifying things happening beneath the narrative of the book, and either I was too dumb to understand them, or the narrator was sure to only give us small glimpses of whatever terrifying thing glued the plot together from the shadows. After reading this book I was in the funkiest, weirdest mood for a whole week. Suffer the Children. It's about a girl who is possessed by her ancestor's ghost, who was raped and killed by her father, who committed suicide shortly after, and takes to kidnapping neighborhood children, trapping them in a cave, and forcing them to act out her own sexual abuses on a dead cat, while her mute sister, who is mute because their father raped her, is forced to silently watch. The Rape of Nanking by Iris Chan. It's a non-fiction documenting the Japanese atrocities in the Chinese city of Nanking during WW2. There's also a section in the middle with photos of said atrocities. Believe it or not, but the text is even more gruesome than the pictures. I Have No Mouth, and I Must Scream by Harvan Ellison. Horrifying evil AI takes over story. What happens to the main character at the end is one of the most unpleasant fates I've ever read. Helter Skelter, Manson's recent death notwithstanding. With just a little imagination, it's good for a lot of sleepless nights. It was so quiet. One of the killers would later say, you could almost hear the sound of ice rattling in cocktail shakers in the homes way down the canyon. Apostrophe. My recommendations. We wish to inform you that tomorrow we will be killed with our families by Filip Gurevich. An intense, gut-wrenching account of the genocide in Rwanda. While I'm certain that there might be a more ducked up fiction book, this one takes the cherry in my opinion. You sit there, read and feel your bone marrow go cold while remembering that all that really happened. For Christ's sake, not even the Nazi had a large part of their population in the streets for an orgy of BBQ, beer and mutilation with machetes. Murder City by Charles Bowden concerns the war for drugs in Ciudad Juarez. Bowden doesn't explain. He just drags you down into the fever dream of a city where killing does not have to make sense at all. Again, non-fiction. The Devil's Butcher shot by Roger Morris about the 1980 riot at the penitentiary at Santa Fe. Shit was going down. Really far down. And the author makes you sick with his attention to details. Wouldn't call it disturbing, but it left me genuinely sad and uneasy. It's Jane Goodall's first book, Shadow of Men, which talks about her first 10 years experience with chimps. It's somewhat disturbing, because you know they are non-fiction. As you get to know the chimps you sort of look at them as characters in a fictional story. Let's just say there isn't a lot of good endings for animals in the wild, especially when polio hit them. Geek Love by Catherine Dunn. I've read a lot of gruesome and depraved stuff. Very little of it troubles me because it tends to push over into absurdity. American Psycho is a key example of this. But there are a lot of horrors that do similar. Geek Love doesn't get really gruesome or graphic. But when things start going wrong and getting worse and worse, it just gets really heavy, thrillingly imaginative, well written and thoughtful, with interesting and often appealing characters. Essentially magic realism. But it gets mighty dark. Piercing by Rai Murakami is up there. If you've read that book then you know about that bathroom scene. That walk into the bathroom scene. I had to shut the book and step away for a moment when it came up because my head would not stop screaming. No, 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 apostrophe. The Handmaid's Tale. Margaret Atwood. After having sex with Nick, Offred whispers her real name into his ear. It's more private and intimate than anything else she can offer him, including her body. When the book is closing, she doesn't know if Nick is saving her or turning her in. We're left in limbo whether she was right to trust him with something so sad and simple as her identity. She doesn't know if she should trust Nick, and we don't either. And we want to, but we can't. It's heartbreakingly sad and depressing. Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl. I've mentioned this book on many must-read threads, but it fits here as well. It's by a psychotherapist whose experiences in a concentration camp led him to develop a school of therapy centered around finding a sense of meaning and purpose in your life. A raison d'etre if you will. It's a truly profound and moving book that really changed my life, but also very disturbing. He describes how the men he was imprisoned with would find simple ways to laugh and enjoy what little spare time they had, before waking up to find one of them had died in the night from the cold, or because his shoes had been so busted that his feet had become infected, or had simply killed himself. The ending of Running Man by Stephen King freaked me out because I realized it was the plot used by the terrorists in the Twin Tower 9/11 attacks. I couldn't stop thinking about it, still do. 2666 by Roberto Bolaño. First off, the book is amazing. Probably my favorite book ever. It's cut into 5 parts, and everyone warned me about part 4. Part 4 is about the very real murders of women that are currently happening in Ciudad Juarez. The whole book gives you the sense that there is an unknown, terrible force controlling the world, and that we are all a part of it. And that 4th part it just does something to you. The Jungle by Upton Sinclair. In school all they told me about this book was that it exposed gross food conditions and indirectly led to the creation of the FDA. What they don't tell you is that it's actually firebrand commentary on the abuse of immigrants and laborers in the United States. That book is ducking brutal, dude. And you'll feel so awful for poor Jurgis and his family by the time you get to the end, especially because you know what Sinclair didn't. The Soviet Union is about to come along and stomp all that great hope he has for socialism right out of existence. A Gin Court by Bernard Cowell. follows a young archer in a recounting of the Battle of Agincourt. It's real historical fiction, not sugarcoating the reality of medieval wars. In the beginning, French soldiers raid a town and go around tying women between barrels with their legs spread, and they rape them. Cowell also describes how the French brutally torture captured soldiers, castrating them and spearing out their eyes with knives. Shit's crazy. Please click subscribe if you enjoyed this video.